Good morning. I'm not on the beach for the sunrise, but it's still beautiful. The sun is actually peeking up right now over the horizon. My D-Minder app says that the sun will rise at 7:01, so right now we're just getting the early stages of it. Hold, please. Okay, so I'm actually here. I'm going to talk about the pelvic floor this morning, but I think I'm going to run back inside and drop my dog off since he's already done doing his thing, and then I'm going to walk on this golf course. So give me 1 second. If it's still up on my stories, but yesterday I shared in my stories that it seems to me that women still, he wants to play right now. This is why I haven't been doing these lives, you guys. It's hard to do lives and have a child with you on your hikes and your walks and your I can't even. Cuteness. It's really hard. I haven't been doing these because I still haven't quite figured out a routine with him. We haven't. You're so cute, baby. Guess how much he weighs? I know, he's so cute. But he's kind of wild. Like, he's just too wild. He doesn't know how to walk and just walk with me and pause, and he will want to sit down and start chewing a stick, and I want to keep moving. All right, let's start again. So let's start again. Here's my sunrise today. Whew. Got some congestion. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the pelvic floor and the fact that we all have one and that it should be supple and buoyant. And yesterday, if you weren't on my stories, I shared that I had a client who had a doctor who told her she had a weak pelvic floor. And I don't like to use this term, weak. I'm very careful with the terms I use with my clients and patients. I don't like to say weak pelvic floor because whenever I think weak, I think of laxity, muscles that are not activating, muscles that are in the lengthened state, muscles that can't contract, can't shorten. So that's what I think of when I think of weakness. But I understand that in the medical world and in the physical therapy world, I'm an occupational therapist. I've studied kinesiology and occupational therapy, and then women's pelvic health, pelvic therapy. But I know that weakness can also be attributed to muscles that are not functioning properly. They're not doing their job, especially in the physical therapy world. However, when I learned, because of the way I am, because I'm very high context, and I take things literally sometimes. I'm not the greatest when it comes to sarcasm, although it might appear that I am, but I'm not. If someone uses the word weak, I will myself, because of my studies and my background, I will think of the muscle fibers as lengthened. But people can call the pelvic floor weak if it's in a very contracted, shortened state, because it doesn't have range of motion, so it still can't function optimally. But I always think about the state of the muscle. So I don't like referring to it as weak. And here's a great example why. Because when people think weakness and they think pelvic floor, they automatically think Kegels, and that is incorrect. So ladies, if you have an overly active pelvic floor, a pelvic floor that's in a highly contracted state, or even if you're experiencing any type of pelvic pain, you don't want to do Kegels. Kegels are not your friend. Kegels are actually your worst enemy. If you are already in a overactivated, contracted state, yeah, I don't need to go to the beach all the time to get my sunrises. Look at how beautiful this is. Certainly isn't the same as the beach, but I still have some beautiful views here. Was snapping some pictures. So Kegels, if you have pelvic pain, if you have pain with sex and penetration, pain with putting tampons in, or pain with gynecological exams when gynecologists use speculums, which, do they still use speculums? Those are so archaic. I don't know why they still use those. The last time I went, I don't think I remember them using that. Actually, they did. They had to look at my cervix. Anyway, so these kind of, if you have pain, these pelvic floor issues will arise with gynecological exams, for example. And if that's you, then you should be working on relaxation training. You might have trigger points in the pelvic floor that need to be worked on. You might, so that's just like you would have muscle knots and stress in other parts of your body, like in your neck or your back. And has anyone ever seen that alligator tool? It's like a plastic thing. I don't even know. It looks like an alligator. It's got little protrusions of the plastic that come off of it with a little ball at the end. And they call it the alligator, I think. Well, some guy is making a lot of money off of that, because basically you can use that to target muscle knots on your own body, on your back, on your neck, right? Well, there is something very similar in the pelvic health world for women, for their pelvic floor muscles, for their vaginal canal. So you would use it internally. Yes, this is beautiful. You would use, they are called pelvic wands. You would use this pelvic wand internally yourself on your own to work on your muscle knots. Some people like to do it with partners. When it comes to muscle knots, I wouldn't recommend having a partner do it, because it's so specific and so targeted that just as when you're asking a partner to hold down on a muscle knot or help massage something out for you, sometimes they can't pinpoint it exactly. Oh my goodness. And that's because you're going to be more accurate yourself. I mean, if you have what I like to call that perfect trust with your partner, which of course is never going to be perfect because you're humans and only God is perfect. But if you do have that close to perfect trust and you want to be intimate with your partner that way, because there's so many ways of being intimate with your partner, even if you're doing therapeutic things for yourself, for healing your pelvic floor, you can still involve your partner and have that be your intimacy, for example. This is kind of off topic, but not really. But another tool that they can use, depending on the issue, maybe you don't have a trigger point, maybe it's not a specific tender spot on one of the muscles, one or two of the muscles. Maybe it's the pelvic floor collectively as a whole system that's overactive, because that's also possible. That's possible with after childbirth. Some women experience where their entire pelvic floor collectively becomes extremely contracted in an overactive state. They might have trouble urinating. They might have frequency issues or urinary urge issues. These people, again, they have issues with penetration, with sex, tampon, speculum, etc. So for those people that it's a whole collective pelvic floor as a whole issue, I would recommend dilators. So dilators are used, they do exactly that. So they help dilate the vaginal canal. And people think that you're using dilators to stretch. Again, stretch. There's certain words I don't like to use around my clients. Weakness, stretch, and Kegels. Those are 3 words I don't like to use because people get the wrong idea. So I won't be using them until I know that they're educated in the area. So dilators are used to assist with dilating the vaginal canal. And yes, in a way stretch the pelvic floor. But I like to describe it as trying to get as many positive pain experiences as possible. I know that sounds like an oxymoron. How can you have positive pain experiences? Well, pain is really just a signal. It's just information about our bodies, especially when you're not actually in danger. So that's like with childbirth. You're not actually in danger when you have that pain or the ring of fire as the baby's coming out. That doesn't mean something horrible is happening and there's something horribly wrong. No, that's just part of the process. It's part of the process. We can override how we interpret pain. We can override the word, I guess, interpretation. We can override our interpretation and dampen our pain sensation. We can turn down that volume of pain just by training ourselves and becoming more comfortable with the sensation and talking to ourselves, actually telling ourselves, okay, I'm not in pain, or I'm not in pain. I'm not in danger. My pelvic floor is safe. I'm using a dilator. This is therapeutic, for example. Just talking yourself out of this sympathetic state, I guess. It's a state of the mind as well as the body. So if you can calm that mind a little bit, the body will follow. That's the idea. And it's always best to focus on the sensations rather than the thoughts that you're thinking. But you do want to start with thoughts if the thoughts are overriding, if the thoughts are overpowering, and not allowing you to do what you need to do. Okay? So even dilators in the beginning are hard for some women because, they can't have sex with their partner. They can't experience that kind of intimacy, and maybe it's not the kind of lovemaking they want to make, and it's daunting at first. But what kind of tool you use really matters. What kind of tool you use really matters. So this is why I recommend for my ladies Intimate Rose products, because this was actually created by a pelvic therapist who, the reason she made these products was because there was nothing else on the market to be used as therapeutic tools for women experiencing pain or extremely overactive pelvic floors. They were very, just dildos. And some of these dildos are huge and plastic and cold and ugly, and they're daunting, okay? If you've never been in one of those intimate stores or sex shops or whatever people call them nowadays, and you look through some of their items, they're just weird and they're very unnatural looking. And I don't blame these women for some of these women shut down when I share dilators. I have to be very careful with who I share these tools with and when. But I also have to educate and let them know, listen, this is not a sexual thing. I'm not trying to sexualize you or objectify you. Of course, that they wouldn't be there with me if that was the case. But I understand, because I grew up that way. I grew up in a very conservative household where even tampons were not allowed. My parents, that was like unspoken. That was unheard of. You were not allowed to use that. So I understand. But Amanda Olson, who is the owner of Intimate Rose, created these dilators with exactly that in mind. She created these dilators with women like myself and other people in mind, and her dilators are made of silicone grade or medical grade silicone. Beautiful, soft, various sizes. She has two packs of 4. Each pack is a different set of sizes. It starts very small, size 1 through 4, and then it goes to 5 through 8. And what's special about these dilators, they're bendy. That's how I describe them. They're very bendy, they're flexible, they're pliable, they move. They're flexible so that they can be flexible with you as you become more flexible, because these dilators are supposed to be used in different positions. And actually the one you start with is the one that you're most comfortable with in various positions, right? Because when you want to kind of simulate real life, you want to simulate life, and sexual activity is one of them. And when we engage in sexual activity, we're not in just one position. I mean, I'm not, at least. I'm not in one position. Most people are not in just one position. So you want to make sure that your pelvic floor, oh, gorgeous, that you're using a dilator that you're comfortable with. You're starting with the dilator that you're comfortable with in various positions. I get way more in depth about dilators and wands and vaginal weights. Some people call them Kegel weights in my program Revive. That's why I have the 3 calls with the women, because not everybody can benefit from them. And that's about halfway through the program, second call, sometimes by the first call, because I've already had a consult call and I can already tell what you need by the first free consult call. By then, I already know if you would benefit from them. So my program Revive wasn't created initially to be used with these tools, because I believe that if you start introducing tools right away, you take away your body's power, you take away some of your natural power. When you introduce tools, you give away your power, and it kind of turns off it dampens that mind-muscle connection. In my opinion and my experience, what I've seen and my research that I've done, working with people who have had strokes, we never introduce anything like electrical stimulation. Same thing now when I work for myself, when I see women outside of the hospital for pelvic health related things, for women's pelvic health and pelvic therapy, I don't introduce things like biofeedback right away. If women don't practice their breath work and don't practice looking at their parts, using a mirror to become more aware in this way before we throw in a tool like that, like biofeedback, then these are not the women I want to work with. First of all, I can't do that, because that's not going to be lasting results. If you're just going to throw in biofeedback, you're not going to get lasting results this way. In my opinion, this is my professional opinion, I don't think biofeedback should be exactly that, biofeedback. Feedback from your own internal cues, from your own body. Of course, I think they're great tools. I don't think they shouldn't ever be used, and I think they're needed sometimes. But I can tell when someone's done their homework, when a client has done their breath work, practice the breath work, practice the things that I've been teaching them, or when they haven't. It's something that I can tell, and I will not use biofeedback, not right away, because it takes away the power. It kind of turns off. I don't have a better way of explaining this at this time, but it turns off your ability to Okay, so that's a good question. Never thought to look down there. So it depends what you're looking for, what you need. So, for example, if you have a true muscle weakness, a weak pelvic floor, and you don't have a lot of activity, not a lot of contractions of the pelvic floor. So when the pelvic floor is contracting, when the pelvic floor is when you're doing a Kegel, because a Kegel is a pelvic floor muscle contraction, but people forget that you have to also relax the pelvic floor to finish the Kegel. Just like if you're doing a bicep curl, you don't just bend the elbow, you have to extend it again, you fully extend it. And that's a full, complete bicep curl, right? So the same thing with the Kegel. So women, and I'll share this on my stories, when you're doing a Kegel, what you want to look for with a mirror, you're looking at the clitoris. The clitoris is above the urethra, which a lot of people don't even know where the urethra is. It's a very faint, tiny gray dot that's above the vaginal canal. That's where the urethra is. So it's not the vagina, it's not the hole that you would put a tampon in, or the hole that blood comes out of, or the hole that babies come out of. That's not where we urinate from. The hole that we urinate, and I do apologize, I forget that these things seem so basic to me, but they're not. And I have friends that have to remind me all the time that, hey, this is so common and like natural and it comes easy for you, but for a lot of people this stuff is like completely new territory. So I apologize because I do forget. So that urethra is above that, and then the clitoris is right above that. It's like it looks like it has a little hood on top. So the clitoris, what you want to see when you're doing a Kegel, if you need Kegels, if you need to work on pelvic floor muscle contraction, most people need to work on, well, I can't say most, but usually people need to start with relaxation, down regulation before they work on that contraction, kind of to get all the muscles on the same page, if that makes sense, because you can't really isolate those to contract one. You can do okay, I'm digressing. So anyway, what you're looking for when you're holding the mirror down, if you're laying down and you're just scoping out the vag, which I highly encourage to just scope out the vag, look at yourself, and you're working on contractions. The clitoris, when you're doing a Kegel or a pelvic floor muscle contraction, what you want to look for is that the clitoris is moving up and down. And it's not just that. You don't want it to just move up and down. You kind of want it, a stronger contraction, a stronger activation. Oh, so cool. It had something. I think it had like a mouse in its arms. You will see the clitoris go in, so up and in, and then come back down. So it's called the clitoral nod. We refer to it as the clitoral nod. But then at the same time, you want to see your anus, the little hole where poop comes out. If you're laying down, you would see it right beneath the vaginal canal. So you have the perineum, which is that space between the anus and the vaginal canal. That's the perineum. That's the area that most women tear during childbirth. And then the anus is right underneath there. So what you're looking for that person that asked, if you're trying to do contraction, a proper Kegel, you want to see that clitoral nod up and down, and the anal wink, the anus winking. It goes into the body, gets a little smaller, and then you want to see that relaxation again, so then it comes back and it gets bigger, if that makes sense. Anal wink and clitoral nod. So you want to look for these things as you practice, and you practice the Kegels in tandem with the breath work. So remember, engage as you exhale on exertion. Engage, exhale, exert. Exhale, exert, engage. However you want to look at it. E. It's a good way of remembering. So you want to do the Kegel, the contraction, the pulling up, while you're doing your diaphragmatic breathing on the exhale. Boom. So if you're watching this video and you got this far, boom. That's the secret. It's not even a secret. Now, if you are experiencing pain, any type of pelvic pain, you don't want to work on those contractions. You don't want to work on that lifting, right? That's what I started this video talking about. You need to work on relaxation of the pelvic floor, lengthening those muscle fibers. So what you're looking for is actually the opposite of the clitoral wink. The idea is, if it's a whole pelvic floor collectively, if the whole pelvic floor collectively is tight, you would want to look for that opposite. So the idea is that the clitoris is already up and in, and the anus might be winked, in a winked state, if that makes sense. So then you would need the opposite of that. You would want to see the clitoris moving down and out, and the anus unwinking on the inhale. On the inhale. And the more you practice the breath work, because this has happened so many times with my clients and patients that I teach this to in the hospital, initially it's hard to do that diaphragmatic breathing. It's hard to get those deep breaths in. It's really hard. It might feel like you're not getting full breaths and you can't inhale for 4 seconds. I get this all the time. I can't inhale that long, or I can't exhale. I don't feel like my breaths are that long. Great. This is great. You just gathered so much information about your body that you've never gathered before, you never knew. So now you have something to work off of. You have a baseline. Okay, you know you can do about 2 or 3 seconds and then you feel locked up. Let's address that. What's locking up? Are you actually bringing your air down into your pelvis? Are you using your diaphragm? I have ways of checking if you're using your diaphragm. I have ways of knowing if you're using your diaphragm. And if my clinical judgment is telling me that you're not using your diaphragm properly, well, there's things we can do to address that, to fix that, to activate the diaphragm, to help get it moving to its full potential again, so it can serve you fully, so you can get full breaths. There are ways to stimulate the diaphragm. Singing is one of them. Singing stimulates your diaphragm differently than speaking. There are also certain stretches, certain positions when our body is, our trunk is extended and laterally flexed and then even rotated. So if you extend yourself, this is why yoga can be great for this. Yoga activates the diaphragm pretty well if you're breathing in the transitional phases of the exercises, because in yoga you're always extended, your trunk is always extended, you're twisting, you're turning laterally, so it really activates that diaphragm. It's beautiful, it's perfect for that. And prior to studying pelvic, this is a side note, prior to studying pelvic therapy and women's pelvic health, I'm still a bodybuilder at heart, but I would kind of poke fun at my yogi friends. Like, okay, I'm not going to yoga. I'm not going to go to yoga and eat a salad. I'm going to go hit the gym and the weights and then eat like a big chicken or steak after with whatever I macro counted. But I would poke fun, like, oh, you and your breath work, I always thought it was just like woo-woo stuff. I didn't really see the benefit. This was years ago. And when I started studying pelvic therapy, pelvic health, to make this career path switch, I realized, holy crap, this stuff is so powerful, because I was doing the exercises myself, and I still do the breath work, and I realized, oh my goodness, this really does work. This really does engage my pelvic floor. I have been doing my Kegels wrong this whole time, and when I do them on the exhale, I can do them so much better. And now when I throw in a tool like a band or a ball to help capitalize on that movement, that natural movement, with some exertion as I exhale and engage, it's that much more. I get more range of motion. It was a shocker to me. I just couldn't believe what was happening in my own body. That breath work was actually that powerful. Oh, sweet. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to drop names, but I appreciate you too. I appreciate you too. I'm so thankful for you. One of my clients in here, she popped in. So thankful for you. I'm so thankful for you. I hope that was helpful. I'm not sure where I left off. Humming can help. It can help stimulate, but humming requires you to keep your mouth closed. And I've shared it before. I'll share it again on my stories. I'll try to share a whole bunch of stuff on my stories today about certain things I touched upon in this conversation. The thing about humming is that your mouth is closed when you're humming. And what I teach is that as long as your jaw is relaxed and the air is freely flowing, so if you don't have congestion issues, you don't have issues with your nose and the air is not flowing, if the air is flowing freely through your nose and fully, then fine, you can keep the mouth closed. But especially during the exercises and the breath work I teach, I usually tell women to try to keep their mouth open. I try to tell them to keep their mouth open and jaw relaxed. I gotta run in and make my hubby breakfast. And sorry, distracted. Oh, because here's why. Because when the jaw is relaxed, there's research behind this. I don't just pull this out of nowhere. When the jaw is relaxed and the shoulders in the upper region, I forgot the guy that studied this, but I'll try to figure out his name. I don't know if his name is that important. It's the studies that are more important. When you relax your jaw and your shoulders, the pelvic floor tends to also relax because they are connected. They are intimately connected. And that's the same reason that women are told in childbirth to keep their mouth open and to vocalize, to make sounds, to continue breathing, because that air needs to be flowing freely. I really need to start my lives and my series again so I can get into this, because this has to do with so much. The stacked pressure container systems that our body operates on. I'll share that post again. If you have disruption in the pressure in any of those containers, then it can lead to eventually issues in the pelvic floor or issues in the deep core and superficial muscles. So you might have diastasis recti if there's disruption in that 3 stack pressure container system. That's diastasis recti is a midline separation. So what I mean by connected, thank you for helping me bring my thought back around. What I mean by connected is that when we were children, so actually the epiglottis resembles the pelvic floor, the epiglottal muscles, your vocal cords, they look almost exactly like the pelvic floor. They're shaped, this beautiful diamond triangle structures, right? They form these beautiful shapes that resemble each other. And that has to do with the fact that when we were babies, we were embryos developing. Yeah, that can definitely affect your pelvic floor. If you're always tense in your shoulders, usually that will cause people to breathe incorrectly, and we call paradoxical breathing. You still breathe and you're still getting oxygen, don't get me wrong, but it's not as efficient. So you're breathing more with your chest. Usually if you have tight shoulders, you're most likely a chest breather, but you can train out of that. I used to be a chest breather in college, in my undergrad, and my professor pointed it out. He's like, "Are you stressed?" And I told him, "No, I'm fine. I feel great." I was, though, internally, subliminally. I didn't realize it. And he's like, "Well, why are your shoulders so raised?" And as soon as he said that, my shoulders went down a whole 2 inches. And I was like, whoa, I will never, ever forget that. It was one of those huge life-changing moments. I love this professor. It was amazing. Best professor ever. Dr. John Kumlili, he's from England. He taught in Chicago, University of Illinois at Chicago. I was in the top three program, kinesiology program in the US. I was proud of that. Anyway, I will never forget that. So when we were embryos, really quick, I'll leave you guys with this last thought and then I'm going to go inside. When we were embryos and our body was like curled up like this, right? So our pelvic floor, so imagine this part. Sorry, I can't point right now. I'm not bragging. I didn't even know it was when I got in. And then I realized it was the third one. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Great. I'll take it. Ooh. So if this is, we're a little embryo and this is our neck and head area. So this is our head and this is our neck. And then this is our pelvic floor. Imagine the embryo being curled up like this. Something like this, okay? This is not a great representation, but it's curled up like this. And these two parts were touching like this. So the epiglottis and the pelvic floor, imagine they were touching like this. And so as the baby grows, it grows into a human. It moves away. Okay? This is actually why methylation issues, so women that have problems methylating their B vitamins. So methylation is just when you add that little tail of, gosh, I can't remember how many carbons and hydrogens. I always mess that up. I think it's like 3 carbons and 1 hydrogen. My sister always has to remind me. It doesn't matter. It's a little tail that adds in chemistry of molecules that needs to be attached to your B vitamins in order for your body to use them to become, I guess, bioavailable to your body. Women that have methylation issues will have babies that don't develop properly. So they have anencephaly, which is just a poor development of the brain, and also spina bifida. There's different levels of problems, like how bad it is. I mean, it's all bad, but basically there's poor spinal closure of the baby. The fetus, at the very bottom, their spine doesn't close, and sometimes there's also like hair that grows down there. All of that is a methylation issue, and the good doctors know that even the tongue tie that some babies develop, that tongue tie that doesn't allow the babies to latch and suckle on the teat to get nutrition, that tongue tie, and then they have to release it, right? The doctors just snip their tongue or something. That also has to do with methylation issues. If methylation issues can cause something as big as closure of the spine, a lack of closure of the spine at the bottom of the back, then you bet your bottom dollar that it can cause something not as big as a tongue tie. So even if you had a mild methylation issue when your baby is born, it could have tongue tie. Okay, I'm not a doctor, it's not medical advice. It's just what I've learned from my own research, and people should know that tongue tie issues, latching, can have to do with methylation. And most doctors only check one methylation pathway. There's like 4 or 5 of them, I'm not sure. My doctor, Dr. Courtney Hunt, is amazing, and she checks them all. And thank the Lord, I am not at risk. I'm not at risk for the pregnancy, the risk factors, but I do have methylation issues. I do have methylation, so that's why I have to take methylated folate. Yeah, okay. I'm going inside now. I hope that answered the question. Bye, guys.